So the Persian Bayan is something I want to go into. And honestly, each of these books, the Kamal Asma, we could do an entire session on and actually several sessions on. And there's probably better placed people than myself to actually run those sessions. We have scholars that are with us. But the Persian Bayan is something that I'm going to, with your permission, just go through and try and share some thoughts and some things on, taken from God Passes By. So we know from God Passes By, we have some various quotes which I've pulled out. One of them being this, that within the walls of that same fortress, so Makul we're talking about, the Bayan, that monumental repository of laws and precepts of the new dispensation and the treasury, enshrining most of the Bab's references and tributes to, as well as his warning regarding him whom God will make manifest, was revealed. So the Bab is laying down what's going to happen. We also know that the Persian Bayan is peerless among the doctrinal works of the founder of the Babi dispensation. There's 9 varheads of 19 chapters. So there's these 9 sections of 19 chapters, except the last varhead, which compromises of only 10 chapters. This body of work, this Persian Bayan, is approximately 8,000 verses long. And as we know, there's the Persian Bayan and then there's the Arabic Bayan. And the Arabic Bayan, it shouldn't confuse the two of them. They were revealed during the same period, but this has 11 varheads of 9 chapters and there's only 420 verses. So you see it's about 5% of the size. It's a lot smaller. We know that this book, it fulfills the Muhammadan prophecy that a youth from Bani Hasham will reveal a new book and promulgate a new law. So the Bab was from the tribe of Bani Hasham. It's wholly safeguarded from the interpolation and corruption, which has been the fate of so many of the Bab's lesser works. So this is absolutely untouched, pure work that we have. The book occupies a pivotal position in Baha'i literature, should be regarded primarily, and this is something I mentioned before, as the eulogy of the promised one, rather than just a bunch of codes and laws and ordinances designed to be a permanent guide to future generations. This book at once abrogated the laws and ceremonials enjoined by the Quran. Some of the laws that are abrogated are things such as the way in which prayer is done in some forms. Fasting, the Baha'i fast is obviously different in terms of duration, things like marriage, divorce, and inheritance. So it kind of refreshes some of the ways in which these things that should be done. It also upholds in its integrity the belief that the prophetic mission of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, even as that is the gospel and the divinity of Christ, are very much supported by the Bab. It moreoverly interprets into a masterly fashion the meaning of certain terms frequently occurring in the sacred books of the previous dispensation, such as paradise, hell, death, resurrection, the return, the balance, the hour, the last judgment, and the like. So there's certain things that the Bible will take, and in a masterly fashion, he'll reinterpret what all of these means. Which again, you have to realize the Bible is coming to slap everything, to make everything new, to refresh everything, and give it this new vibrating force.
So, should we be reading the Bayan as well as Baha'u'llah's laws?
So the laws of Baha'u'llah supersede the laws of the Bab. So I think they're interesting perhaps to read just from a point of view of trying to understand the bigger picture, but right now, no, the laws of the Bayan are superseded by that of Baha'u'llah. Looking at the Bayan here, it says that the Guardian's written that it's designedly severe in the rules and regulations it imposes, revolutionizing its principles it instills, calculated to awaken them from the age-long torpor from the clergy and the people, and to administer a sudden and fatal blow to the obsolete and corrupt institutions it proclaimed through its drastic provisions, the advent of the anticipated day, the day when the summoner shall summon to a stern business, when he will demolish whatever hath been before him, even as the apostle of God demolisheth in the ways of those that have preceded him. So again, he's coming down, he's bringing these laws, he's having this break. Islam is truly loved by Baha'is, by Babis. It's the faith that we come from. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is so very, very dear to us. But just as the same with the teachings of the Bab and some of the laws of the Bab, once Baha'u'llah comes, these things are abrogated. Not to mean that they were wrong, but the time has changed and has moved forward. One very interesting thing from the Persian Bayan is something written in the 3rd Varhed. And it's this quote here. Well is it with him in his prophetic announcement, who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Baha'u'llah, and rendereth thanks unto his Lord, for he will assuredly be made manifest. God hath indeed irrevocably ordained it in the Bayan. So this is before Baha'u'llah has come out. You know, this is around 1848 that this is written. That in the 3rd Bayan, he mentions the name Baha'u'llah. He really goes into it and mentions. So the Persian Bayan, each of our head, begins with an Arabic summary of its contents, which makes it easier to read than many of the Bab's works. Not to say that this is an easy thing to read in any way, shape, or form. We know that Professor E.G. Brown had tried to do a translation, and this has been described by the scholar Nader Saidi as one of the worst translations ever. Despite his Persian and his Farsi being absolutely sublime, he wasn't able to grasp some of the inner meanings of Islam, and his knowledge on Islam wasn't quite high enough as it should be. And there's many references that are made from this. So if you look at the writings of the Bab, you'll find some extracts of this. Then we know the Frenchman A.L.M. Nicolas, I'm trying to sound really French when I do that. A.L.M. Nicholas translated the entire work into French into 450-page volumes. But again, as Baha'i, this isn't the Baha'i translation, the Bible translation, which is usually so meticulous. The Baha'is obviously believe that the Bayan was written and it wasn't completed. Remember I said that there were these 9 sections with chapters, by heads, that are all 19 each, apart from the last one, which only has 10. The Bible explained that it would be the task of him whom God shall make manifest. So he's given this task onto Baha'u'llah, saying that he would complete the Persian Bayan. How amazing is this, that the Bab is writing all these works, and I'm sure the Bab could complete it if he wants, but he's making this link and he's saying, no, Baha'u'llah will come and do this. So again, everything he's doing in the Persian Bayan, he's trying to turn people's heads to Baha'u'llah. Time and time again, he's trying to say, Baha'u'llah's coming, Baha'u'llah's coming. So we believe the Kitab-e-Igan to be the completion of that. Just touching quickly on the Arabic Bayan, we know there's just 420 verses. This was written roughly late 1847, 1848, and then Chehreg, the second prison city that the Bab was in, maybe part of this, was finished. A.L.M. Nicolas refers to it as the epitome of the Baha'i teachings. Now we're going to look at some of the harsh laws. We're going to dip into this really quick. So these are some of the laws that exist in the Persian Bayan, which might trip you out a little bit, but stick with it for now. So he says that all lands must be conquered by the Bayan. When we talk about the Bayan, we're not just talking about the book, the Bayan. The Bayan actually refers to all the writings of the Bab as well. Property of unbelievers must be seized. Now you're probably thinking, what? The properties of unbelievers must be seized? This doesn't sound Baha'i-like or Babi-like. The spoils of conquest are to be distributed. No marriage with non-believers. Unbelievers banned from 5 provinces in Iran. How crazy does this sound? That you're going to ban, when this is such a faith of unity, you're going to ban from these 5 provinces. Iran. Babis cannot allow unbelievers into their homes. What is going on? All of a sudden now you can't allow non-believers into your home? Like this, okay, this seems a bit out there. And then all books written by non-Babis should be destroyed. These laws seem completely and utterly out there and completely crazy. Now, what we've got to look at is that actually the Bab is being very, very clever here. The Bab isn't actually saying any of these things. If we go on for a little bit, if we go on, you'll see some of his other laws, the prohibition of causing grief to anything. So how is it possible to fulfill any of these other laws when this is in place? So what the Bab essentially is saying is he's trying to bring people in. He's saying there are these laws, but you can't do them, and they actually don't exist. In the same way it's said that a Baha'i can marry 2 people if you can treat them equally, and Abdul Baha says you can't treat them equally, and I wouldn't recommend it anyway. But if you are able to do that, if you can treat them equally, what Baha is effectively saying is you can't do this thing. Same with these laws. The Bab is laying it down, and he's saying that, look, this is not the way in which we're doing things. We're doing things very, very, very differently. So there are some people at the time who would maybe believe that that is the way to be done, to have this art. If someone were to claim to be the Mahdi, the Qa'im, as we see with the way Islam was practiced in Iran at that time, that what did they do to the Bab? They crucified him, effectively. They hung him up and they shot him. This is what they did to him. The Bab goes far as saying, if someone claims to be him whom God shall make manifest, so if someone's claiming to be Baha'u'llah, what should we do to him? Should we kill them? Should we hang them up? He says, no. He says, if they make that claim, you should give them a pension for the rest of their life. The fact that they've made that very claim means that it's such a great thing. This is the way in which we should treat them. Obviously, we shouldn't follow them if they're not who they claim to be. But it's a very, very, he's turning everything on its head, the amount of love that he's pouring forth and showing. So some of the more gentle spirits in the Bayan, as I said, there's the prohibition to causing grief to anything. to respond to letters, all letters promptly. So if you get a text message, you need to respond to it quickly. It's amazing, because why? This whole waiting is causing people grief. Answer all cries of babies, apparently. So if you've got any babies crying in the background, which you've muted your mics, which I appreciate, you should go and answer their cries. You shouldn't leave them. Even the baby, you shouldn't leave to grieve. You can't restrict the movement of anyone. So having slaves and the rest of it, you can't control people like that. There should be no warfare, slavery, cutting off hands and stoning. No overloading of animals either should take place. So even the animals, he's reaching out and he's saying that the way we treat animals is incredibly important. Some more, and these are some of the more fun ones. Doors must be tall enough for tall people. Now, what a seemingly bizarre law. Doors must be tall enough for tall people? I mean, is this what a manifestation of God is coming to teach? But again, it's about this thing of not offending anyone. When someone goes to someone's house, if the door isn't tall enough, you end up bending down and you're asking people to almost lower themselves. So he's saying, no, we just make doors tall enough for everyone. Allow everyone into your house. Yes, this isn't just about tall people, really. It's about this causing grief. You should repay all loans. There's no spanking or humiliating children. So if you want to spank or humiliate children, not allowed. That's ruled out. There's actually interesting things about the hitting of children, how you're only allowed to do it with a certain force, a certain amount of times. And as a man, if you overstep that boundary, there's mythicals that you can pay, or there's no sleeping with your wife. Some really interesting laws. You must be perfect at everything you do. Make all handicrafts perfectly. So this idea of beauty that we find in so many things is really important, to have this real beauty. You should refine your character again and beautify all things. He is trying to change the hearts. He's trying to make everything anew. This is what the Bab's trying to get us to do. Change your clothes and wash often. I, as a DJ who work in the nightclubs, I really wish to have this on a plaque, because some people don't quite get that. The message of the Bab would help me out massively. Then some of the selections from the writings of the Persian Bayan. God loveth those who are pure. Naught in the Bayan and in the sight of God is more loved than purity and immaculate cleanliness. God desireth not to see in the dispensation of the Bayan any soul deprived of joy and radiance. So again, those harsh laws, it's impossible. It can't be. He indeed desireth that under all conditions, all may be adorned with such purity, both inwardly and outwardly, that no repugnance may be caused even to themselves, how much less unto others. We know that the Bab banned the eating of garlic. That outwardly would upset people. He banned the eating of garlic. Why? So that you wouldn't offend him whom God shall make manifest. Now, was this really about the Bab worrying about offending His Holiness Baha'u'llah with the breath? Or was it making the point that him whom God shall make manifest is so close, is around the corner, that this is the important thing, that you should look out for him? It's this serious. You are not allowed to read other people's mail. Just bear that in mind when you're going through a dodgy relationship and you want to check. No reading each other's mail. You must help travelers who are weak. You must not engage in confession. We know that we don't have confession. This one, my favorite, probably, no wearing of frightening outfits in public. I mean, how great is this? You cannot go as a scary monster in public and just be like, like on your holy days. Don't do this. This is not a good thing to do. The Bab's really going down to that level of detail there. Rage and wrath prohibited. That's probably a good shout. Let's not have rage and wrath, people. And then there's a special prayer for the moments of birth and death. The Babi calendar is also introduced that makes time filled with God. And I think this is partly to do with the 19 days we have in each month and the 19 months. And
Dave, can I actually ask a question? Because it's going to bother me otherwise. Like, a few slides ago when you were talking about the harsh laws, and there's one about, like, I think destroying all books that are non-Babi books, basically. Why do you think, like, because I almost became a librarian and I have an affinity for books, and I'm just wondering, why do you think destroying texts that are, from a different religion or whatever, why do you think that law exists?
Well, again, dear Nadia, the whole point of what I'm saying here is that these laws don't exist. We don't want to destroy all books. There was this way of seeing things that actually, if they don't fit within a certain bracket, we should destroy them because they're blasphemous. They're from the kafir. They're against God, and that's not what it is. So the Bible's saying, yes, destroy all books, don't cause harm to things, don't do these things. Every one of these laws, there's a rebuttal where he's saying, no, don't do this. So for a second, I mean, the love that the Bab has for the Holy Quran is insane. Like, you think he ever wants that to be destroyed, or the Torah, or the Bhagavad Gita, or any of these books? Absolutely not. So it's not actually something that he's saying go ahead with and go forth with and do. Not in the slightest. He's actually saying don't do these things. And there are people at the time that think some of these laws are okay. I hope you do become a librarian.
Add something to that. So going back to the purpose of the Bible revelation, it was basically to break away entirely with Islam and its traditions, like to really prepare the ground for the coming whom God shall make manifest, and really like establish this clear breaking away. So the way I understand these harsh laws is essentially to show that everything that was in place is now no longer stands, and to ensure the preeminence of the Bayan and the Babi's revelation. So all the harsh laws is basically to put in the minds of people like, now every old standard is out of the door and all of these new standards are taking place. So I think that's the reason why these harsh laws, and of course they are not to be applied because we have all these other laws that cancel them out. However, the psychological effect, or like the spiritual effect, is there. Like nothing else now stands but the Bayan.
The Bab's revelation is revolutionary on a level that we haven't seen it before. I was talking earlier with our scholar, Dr. Fanan Apazir, and he used this analogy. There was an advert a few years ago, which I found that's really funny. And there was a drink called Tango in England. And people would wear these big orange gloves, and they'd go up to people and they'd go slap on their face. And the whole thing was, you've been tangoed. And he was saying it's almost like the revelation of the Bab is tangoing people. It's sort of saying to people, come on, wake up, this is it. This big sharp burst that really just judders people. Now, of course, the Babi revelation, the Babi faith, is a link between Islam. It's this bridge between Islam and the Babi faith. But as I said, the primary purpose of this is a eulogy to Baha'u'llah. Everything is turning things round to Baha'u'llah. There's also this abjad system, as I keep mentioning, this abjad system, where the Bab, somewhere in the Bayan, he mentions a law, then at the end, and don't quote me on the number here, but for example, he says, children, and this is one of the law, children are not allowed to sit on the floor whilst learning. Okay, he bans people from going up to the top of pulpits as well. But he'll say one of these laws, and it's not exactly this, but he'll say, children are not allowed to sit on the floor, 273. And you're like, what? And you'll see 273 is in there, and you're like, what? Why is this 273? What's this number 273 in there for? But then you will suddenly start to realize the abjad value of 273 is that Ali Qabla Muhammad verily is the Ghaim, referring to himself. So there are all these mystical things that are thrown in there. More importantly, these prophecies about Baha'u'llah. In there, he talks about how Baha'u'llah will come after 19 years, and there's this mention of how something will happen in 9 years. We know that the Bab's revelation started in 1844. Baha'u'llah, 9 years later, and the Siyah receives his revelation. So there are all these signs that are in there. It's such a deep work. But anyway, hopefully that gives you a brief overview of the Bayan. As I said, we could talk for hours and hours, and I'm aware we're here to study God Passes By, but I thought it was unfair to just gloss past some of these things. So
thank you for sharing about the Bayan. A quick comment about the Babi calendar. I find it quite interesting that it seems, from my very limited understanding, it seems that it's one of the only things installed by the Bab that has been carried on into the Baha'i revelation, the Babi calendar, and of course we have the prayers. And I was wondering why is that so? And then I thought that perhaps it's because keeping that is really a way of integrating the Babi dispensation into the Baha'i one, and also because the Baha'i dispensation and more than that, the Baha'i cycle, I think, era starts in 1844. So then it makes complete sense that because the Baha'i era starts in 1844, that we are essentially using the calendar that was given by the Bab himself. Maybe there are other explanations for that.
There are many laws as well, by the way. Just, there's many other things from the Bab that does get carried on, that Baha'u'llah does accept. There's a whole bunch of things that actually Baha'u'llah takes on and says, yes, this law stays, this law stays. And all of these laws here are described as being acceptable only if him whom God shall make manifest will accept them. So it's waiting on his approval. So there's a whole bunch of laws. But again, Roxana, thank you so much. So with all of that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap up this little bit about the Bayan. As I say, we can go into it for days and days, and it's so remarkable.